Thanks for joining us today. I'm Hal Marcus, and this is a special edition of Meeting of the Minds, the legal AI podcast from Workday CLM. Those of you that know our podcast and listen to it often, and I hope you do, are going to notice some differences this time. Firstly, you're seeing us. You don't always do that. Secondly, production value. This looks a little different from where we typically do this. We're in the Workday studio today. We have cameras. We have lights. I'm wearing a little makeup. Don't hold that against me. The other big thing you're going to notice is that I don't have my co-host, Meme Onwudiwe, is not here today. He's on the other coast doing presentations today. And finally, one more big difference. We are interviewing only Workday personnel today. We have with us Greg Bennett and Kristi Johnson. Greg is the Director of Legal Operations for Workday, and Kristi is Legal Ops Program Manager for Workday. Now, in some ways, this is really not so different from what we typically do. We, on this podcast, interview legal ops leaders, lawyers, contract professionals, chief procurement officers, and people in a variety of roles that are using technology in powerful ways to manage their contracts and achieve other benefits with legal AI. Now, as it happens, Evisort is part of Workday. We became part of Workday late last year, but Workday has been a customer of Evisort since 2021. Greg, Kristi, thanks so much for joining us today. Let me set the premise for this as we begin this conversation. We are often asked at Workday, do we drink our own champagne? And this is one of those unusual cases where actually Workday was drinking the Evisort champagne for several years prior to the acquisition. So they liked the champagne so much, they bought the company and got into the champagne business. And you two are largely responsible for that. So we thought we'd get a conversation going, explore your backgrounds, explore how this came to be, and in particular, get into how you achieved this really remarkable result that you got, which was a 35x return on investment. So let's delve into that. But first, let's get to know you. So Greg, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role and how you came to it.
Sure. My name's Greg Bennett. I'm a Director of Technology and AI for our Global Legal Services Department within our legal department at Workday. I've been here since 2019. Since the beginning, we started looking at Evisort since I first landed at Workday.
Fantastic. So we're going to delve deeper into that. But Kristi, let's get into your background as well. And you joined the company. We were just talking about this, like right as this project began.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Kristi Johnson. I'm the program manager for Evisort for Global Legal Services. And that's right. I joined about a month after we procured Evisort. I always want to say acquired, but procured.
Well, you got around to that eventually.
Eventually, yeah. And actually, my background is in business, specifically finance and data analytics. I actually had no prior experience in legal and a legal department, but I did have the opportunity to implement an AI-focused program at my previous company for sales. And Greg just saw the skills that I had to lead a program, specifically change management, experience with AI, and that's kind of how I ended up here right at the beginning. So.
All right. Well, let's talk about what led to the, I don't want to say acquisition, what led to the procurement of Evisort, why Evisort was chosen. But let's start with, how are things done before? And then we're going back to 2021 here, just to give a little framework for it.
Sure. I think we can go back to 2019 is where the use case was first established. We had an audit exercise to where we had to understand the variability of our breach notifications in all of our MSAs. And how would we do that? It wasn't something that we captured in our large box. I would call it a large box CLM system. It wasn't a piece of data. So we took our next manual approach. We downloaded all of our MSAs, packaged them up, and send them off to a third party for analysis. And sending them off to a third party analysis takes time and it takes money. And after that analysis, one of our leadership team members said, hey, there's got to be a better way to doing something like this, because it was time, it was money, and we couldn't react quickly to that type of audit. So luckily, Evisort had reached out even before that exercise. So I
We
called.
were good about that.
You were good about that. Yeah, exactly. So I actually called back Bob Greer, who was the account executive at the time. And I said, hey, we're interested in this. We just hit this use case. Can we get a demo? And from there, we had a demo in early 2020 with our leadership team, and everybody was really amazed at what it could do. And then from there, we did a proof of concept, and you spun up a quick instance of Evisort, and we loaded about 1,000 contracts into it just as a sample. And we spent the course of about a month trying to break it, asking it questions, finding things, searches, and it was a really hard thing to do for us. So from there, we ended up procuring Evisort towards the end of 2020.
Now, this is probably worth clarifying. Now, you were talking about your big box CLM, that predated. And of course, we are a Workday CLM and we have end-to-end CLM capabilities. But really what you were focused on was contract intelligence, right? It was using the AI to delve into what's in those agreements and really understand that.
That's absolutely right. And so when we look at kind of like your usual big box CLM system, those systems do their best to capture the fields and information that you can throughout that process. But there are some things that are very valuable still in that document itself that hold such information about our contract, ultimately about your business, that we can't always find easily.
Are you saying we lawyers don't make these things simple for you in contract language?
I think so, right.
I'm shocked and disturbed to hear this. I'll pass it along.
Right. And so that business value that we recognized and the capability of what Evisort could find opened up a lot of opportunities for us, and just having the knowledge around our contracts.
So what were some of the things that you learned in doing that implementation? Like what worked well? Were there things that were challenging? And Kristi, a lot of that fell to you.
Yeah, exactly. I often ask Greg, what did you do before you had Evisort? If you wanted to know something out of your contract, how did you find that? You had to depend on people's knowledge. Hopefully they remembered the account name. Then you only had to fumble through maybe 10 contracts to find what you're looking for. So I think early on we saw quick wins, and that's how we gained momentum. Thankfully, Greg really saw the need for a true program manager to own the product. And so we really focused on change management. The first few months, that was my goal, just doing road shows, building awareness, showcasing the capabilities. We couldn't just give you another software and say, good luck, right? So we approached it with this white glove service model, doing trainings, individual trainings, group trainings. We also would do search requests for you. So if you needed reporting on contracts, you could come to me and I would provide it for you. And so through that, we quickly developed, people were interested in, how do I get more? I want to do this myself. So we like to think of them as maybe like early adopters. People were interested in using it. So we started what we call our Evisort Champion program, and we identified at least one champion on every legal team to help build that awareness. So when they're sitting in their team meeting and someone's asking, well, how do we find this? They can raise their hand and say, well, I think Evisort could help. So that, I think, was probably one of our big keys to our success early on, just having a dedicated support model.
So, and this dedicated support model you're talking about, again, largely you. So I would think that's probably one of the learnings, right?
Yeah.
Is you want somebody that owns this, ideally. And we should probably give some scale to this, because we've only talked about a very, limited subset, arguably, of the total contracts. And yet the volume is pretty significant, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when you have a dedicated person overseeing this and guiding people into the right way, if not doing the searches for them, I think that's a very valuable piece of a program management and just the services that you could provide with something like Evisort. But now, as we scale, now Evisort is part of the Workday family. Everybody wants a part of Evisort now too, right? And so one of our challenges is to how do we broaden that out even further? Because like I said before, the value within those contracts, and you connect it to the right business people with the right skill set, they will extract that information pretty quickly.
So let's talk a little bit more about the kinds of contracts that went into the system at first and how many we're talking about.
Sure. We first started, per our contract, we wanted to stay within the limits of what we were paying for in Evisort. So one of the most...
We appreciate that. Go ahead.
Of course. So we decided that our best threshold for the contract types that would give us the most value using Evisort was our main services agreement and our subscription order forms. That would give us a good foundational overview of our business. So I think last year, just like you said, we were about 88,000, but now this year we surpassed 100,000 contracts in Evisort.
So it's interesting that the focus here initially was very specifically on customer contracts. And of course, Workday's got a lot of customers, so that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But it was partially about bringing in all those customer contracts. It was partially about extracting that data and then connecting it to Salesforce, the CRM you're using.
That's right. One of the things that we did first, because we weren't, we're standing up a new system and we hadn't implemented the Evisort connector yet. So we manually would take at the end of every quarter, we would download those contracts, then move them into Evisort. This is pre-Kristi, by the way. I just want to highlight.
She would never sanction.
She would never have come over if we didn't have that in place. But as we got the Evisort connector, what that does is when those types of contracts are executed in Salesforce, they automatically move into Evisort. So once we got that flow working, we eliminated that manual process. So now all of those MSAs and those order forms automatically come into Evisort for having the AI analyze them and making that information available to our users.
And then delivering those extracted points back into Salesforce.
Yeah.
So this is why we've got this two-way integration, and Pete, that gets lost a lot of the times. Your process was to actually begin with the process in Salesforce, create then that central repository, that one source of truth within Evisort, and then deliver the extracted data back into Salesforce so sales reps get to see that information side by side with their customer relationships.
That's right. And when you think about that at scale, right, in whether in our RevOps or DealOps people, they have the use case of they're preparing for the next upcoming quarter. They want to do some analysis. It's like the old story, downloading the PDF, thumbing through all the information, putting it into a spreadsheet and doing analysis. Now we're implementing the custom AI feature. We're extracting key pieces of information out of those contracts and then moving them onto the Salesforce record. Now those users can now run large-scale reports based on that information without ever having to thumb through the PDF, ideally.
Right. And let's talk about that a little more. And that gets into something that you spend a good deal of your time on. So custom AI is about the ability to decide what factors you want to find, what terms you want to extract, or at this point, generate, like summaries or calculated dates. So pulling information from the contracts, even when it doesn't necessarily appear in the contract the way that you need it. This has really opened the floodgates for organizations to be creative and not be limited to those core extractions. So what has that meant for Workday and what has that meant for your workload?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned, when we first started, we were doing those road shows and building awareness within legal. We didn't take into account how other organizations, other departments across Workday were going to hear about it and also want information out of the contracts. I would say we greatly maybe underestimated how many different business units and departments need information from our customer contracts. So one great example of how we're using custom AI is publicity rights. We need to know which customers we can identify. And prior to Evisort, they would look at closed opportunities for the month. Maybe they didn't have time to review, hundreds, if not thousands of contracts. So they would just pick a handful and review maybe 20%. With Evisort, at the end of every month, usually on the 1st, within a few hours, I'll pull a report from Salesforce on our closed opportunities, go over to Evisort, pull the customer identification clause from our contract and provide it in a nice little Excel report for our marketing team to review. What we want to do with custom AI, which is what we're working on, is have the AI look at not just the customer identification clause, but also categorize it, send it back to Salesforce. And on the 1st of every month or the 15th of every month, the marketing team can go in and pull a report at their own convenience whenever they need it, and get all of that data that they previously weren't able to grab. So basically going from probably days to hours to minutes.
I don't even know what to say to that. Days to hours to minutes is one of those catchphrases that when you're in product marketing, you like take a pause, write that one down. That's exactly what we want to hear. Now, this is sort of, we're talking daily basis, ongoing sales activity, all those kinds of reports. But there have been some other use cases that have emerged that are more periodic, like M&A. And in fact, we're an example of that. Mm-hmm. I think Evisort was used on Evisort contracts last year. So what's that experience been like? How do you use it in an M&A context?
Yeah, so for M&A, normally pre-acquisition during the due diligence, they will use outside counsel. And they'll only review maybe the top 25 customers. And it could cost, $50,000. With Evisort, our M&A team has their own instance, and they can review all customer contracts, not just the top 25 customers, and get out the key information that they need for due diligence. And like I said, probably hours versus a week of outsourcing that.
Right. And that's the kind of work that you're used to going to outside counsel for, that most folks are used to doing. So there's a very tangible cost associated with
outside counsel, yes.
Yeah. So you get faster information in due diligence. You relay a lot of costs. What happens after the acquisition? That's the next phase that doesn't always get talked about so much. Some people will call it post-merger integration, even though it's not necessarily a merger. That's just the phrase that has emerged. But the idea that you're looking now to reap the benefits of consolidation, right? Reduce costs, deal with any compliance issues, get more standardized, bring all your contracts together. So what's your experience been on that front?
And I'll speak for both of us as a team around Evisort, is that it's ramping up on a daily basis. And like I said before, even with our last town hall with Carl and Jerry and Riley and Anya doing a really great presentation on Evisort, I don't know if you noticed this, but the chat was going crazy on Zoom during that town hall. There's just a lot of excitement around Evisort. And, one of the, I'll say challenges is that we have everybody wants to come in and get information out of Evisort. When we talk to people about coming into Evisort, we want to ensure that they are enabled well or have a good assessment and awareness of what Evisort actually is. I think in the world of AI right now, there are a lot of magic wands that transpire. When we write an email or write a paragraph or whatever that is, when you're searching across large volumes of data, you have to have some type of acumen about what you're doing. And I'm not saying this to dispel the use of Evisort. It's a very powerful tool. And, like I've said before, you can find really great pieces of information with it. But again, we're moving into a new revolution of how we look at our contracts here. And there's a certain nuance to it.
Yeah, this is a really important thing to talk about because a lot of customers struggle with this. On the one hand, we've got things like Ask AI, where you can just ask any question about your contracts. And we've got lots of controls to make it easy to roll it out to lots of people in the organization with very limited features, if you're so inclined. But there's also the issue of, are you going to have too many people now with things like custom AI creating their own fields and training their own models to populate them perhaps differently? There are things you do want to have a bit locked down. And there are certainly basic skills that you want people to have to make sure they're using it responsibly. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely keep a more controlled environment, but I think that's with any product. There's always going to be some permissions to keep kind of people in their guardrails a little bit. And Evisort allows us to do that. And then also for the people that are those early adopters or people that are really getting into it and understand the product and are using it on a daily basis, we can open up some of those additional features on a case-by-case basis. But with the custom AI, you definitely want people that understand how to write prompts, that are thinking of all the different nuances to cover, as well as working with a subject matter expert to build the prompt to ensure that we're capturing the correct information.
Right. You want to make sure when you're using the custom AI capability, this isn't just a one-off, right? A conversational experience like Ask AI, somebody's asking a question, they may save it, they may share it, but it's a little bit different from a custom AI model that is creating a structured data field on every contract, or at least every relevant contract, and populating that across the board. You want a little more control on that. You want to make sure you're doing that right.
Yeah, especially that we are sending that data to Salesforce, and people who maybe are not familiar with Evisort or don't use Evisort are going to be accessing that information.
Right.
But what I do love is you can go back into Evisort. It'll link you right in there, and you can see the sources. You can confirm where that data is coming from. And I think what I've found is people have very diverse expectations of AI, right? On one hand, you have people who are very hesitant and want to use human control, human review. And then we have other people that think it is that magic wand where it reads your mind, right? So trying to bridge the gap in, through the training, through the enablement to get to a middle ground there.
Have you seen both extremes on that? Do some people think
Absolutely.
every answer's got to be a hallucination, and others are like, this is gospel and it's brilliant?
No, I think that's right. And, one thing I want to highlight for Kristi is Kristi comes from a data background too, right? So having her come in and see kind of the three-dimensional views of what Evisort can offer was monumental for us as well. And the other thing about reading contracts is not only that AI comes out with different outcomes, but also people write contracts in different ways too.
Yes.
So we probably have, Kristi, you tell me, how many versions of a clause or how many sentences are written different ways, or days or dates are written different ways.
I've seen 24 hours written about 24 different ways.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Round the clock.
Exactly.
Now I've got the thesaurus going
But
on
with
ahead.
that, we also have 20 years of contracts in there. So you are going to see some differences from basically a startup to now a Fortune 500 company. And Evisort does allow us through the AI to go look for all those variances. But there's still some drawbacks, because if you don't know what's there, the AI might not find it. But that's what I love about Ask AI, is using that natural language to look for things. Maybe you don't know how someone wrote it. You don't have that historical knowledge. But usually the AI is pretty good at finding it. But again, depending on how good your question is that you ask.
So at the beginning here, I threw out a number, and we're going to have to delve into that a little bit more, or people might not believe me. But that's the 35x, 35 times return on investment that you were achieving on a rolling basis by deploying Evisort within the organization. Let's just talk about how you calculate that, where that came about from.
Yeah, so early on with the rollout of Evisort, we wanted to showcase the value. Greg invested in this software, brought me on board as a dedicated headcount. We needed to make sure that we were proving that we are getting the return on this, right? So we began tracking every search or use case for Evisort, really so we could just identify quick wins, larger projects, and then take it a step further with the metrics. So how we did this was we looked at how many contracts are we reviewing. So if we had to outsource reviewing and analyzing these contracts, how many contracts are in scope? We then estimate about 5 minutes per contract of manual review at an outsourcing rate of $115 an hour to get the total cost. So then at the end of every quarter, we add all up those use cases, and then we look at the quarterly cost of the software plus the headcount to get the return on investment. And because we have all of that data, we're able to also track hours saved. I think we're averaging about 50,000 hours saved a quarter. With that, I think the number seems crazy, I know, but would we have outsourced all of those requests? Maybe not, but I think definitely a good handful of them every quarter. But then that also doesn't take into account what individual users are using Evisort for their own use cases.
Right.
So that I think would make our number even higher. So we'll leave it at that.
Right. So this is just the formal requests that come in to run searches and do reviews and analysis of contracts. So you've got 54 custom AI models running on top of the core models, the dozens and dozens that we extract automatically across contracts. That's not factored into this, just sort of the value of having that in Salesforce on a daily basis. This is really just about allayed costs. So, wow, when you look at it from that perspective, and we're factoring in a dedicated Evisort person, then that's pretty significant. And I think this is really important because so many customers will talk to us about, I want to make a business case for contract intelligence. I'm not quite sure how to prove what the value is going to be. Because so much of it just goes into faster access to information and happier, people across the organization because they're getting their answers. But how do you quantify that? You found a way to quantify just a piece of it, and even that piece is really quite a lot.
Yeah. And I think what we can think about too is now that we quantified that, now we've somewhat leveraged the power of AI to find all that information. We can also say that we aren't expending resources to go search through contracts too. Right. We are allowing people to focus on more strategic, high-end initiatives, right? And so when we think about finding the value of what we have in our contracts, now that's all taken care of, right? We're not guessing anymore when we're not limited to just the standard data fields in our standard CLM system.
Right. All right. Speaking of high-end initiatives, let's talk about how we have now formalized this relationship. Well, you bought us. That's pretty formal. But here's another aspect that's formalized it. We've now introduced the Customer Zero program within Workday so that instead of you're just calling us up and telling us what you think of the product, we actually have a much more formalized process now to run new features by the legal team, put it into practice here, back to drinking our own champagne. We want to drink it while it's still brewing, I guess. Do we brew champagne? I'm not even sure I got that right. But let's talk about what this program is really about and what led to it.
Sure. Great question. So after the acquisition, we continued on with Evisort as the message around Evisort grew and grew within the organization, and the product started coming online as a SKU with Evisort. We decided that the legal team with our CLO, Rich Sauer, would be the best customer zero for Evisort. So we wanted to establish ourselves as subject matter experts, A, in contracting, because we are the legal department, and B, and leveraging the knowledge and expertise and experience that we have with Evisort too. So with that, we're putting, just like you said, we're putting in processes in place where we are able to evaluate and use and test out various features of Evisort. And that's led us to become even more excited about what's on the Evisort roadmap too. And for us to be part of that is, I think, leading a legal department into a different direction within an organization. Usually legal departments is seen as the classic speed bump or the people who say no all the time in business.
Shocked I am to hear this. Never heard this.
And
before.
now that we are I would say we are a trailblazer in technology in one of our products now, and having that expertise within a legal department, it positions us with an extreme strategic value now, or strategic opportunities in how we can enable the business and support the business moving forward with it from the legal team.
We were chatting about this previously, and you used a phrase that I loved about future-proofing the legal department. We often talk about future-proofing your AI investment within Evisort because you've got flexibility and we can evolve as LLMs grow. But you were looking at future-proofing the role of the legal department within the organization. Tell us more what you were thinking there.
Well, I think that with AI, just like I said before, as us being part of this customer zero effort, as weighing in on the future of this product really allows us to grow and evolve with our organization and the enterprise itself, and become, just like what we're doing now, becoming true advocates of the product and how we've been using it over the past 4 years. And so when we say future proofing, I don't think the lawyer's job is going to be going away anytime soon with AI. I think we're always going to have that human interface that is so key and important with the training and the expertise that a legal department has. But moving forward, legal departments, and especially our legal departments, are going to become much more efficient, much more quick, I would say, or fast in moving the business through. Mm-hmm. And so when we see those no's, that we'll be able to see those no's coming before they even come to fruition.
Yeah, I may have a skewed impression of this because I've been focusing on legal technology for so many years now, but I see so many attorneys in-house that want to be a proactive part of the business. They really want to drive things forward, and they're tired of it being just, I'm dealing with the inquiries that come in, trying to respond as well as I can. They want to be more of a strategic player and provide proactive value to the business. And first part of that, it seems to me, is know what's in your contracts.
Absolutely. And that kind of speaks to getting Evisort started too, as well. I think that, the way Evisort kind of fits into this very saturated industry of CLM, when we look at the importance of, yes, you do need a contract lifecycle process when you're doing customer contracts, but the best value you can start with is that contract repository. I would even go on a limb and saying having a contract repository that is governed by this contract intelligence piece is even much more powerful than a good quality CLM process as well.
And so why does that matter so much? Because you're right, a lot of organizations are about, okay, I want a CLM. Well, what are you looking to achieve? I want to get our contracts signed faster. Okay, there's a lot of ways to do that. But what is it you're looking to do with your contracts other than speed? What will get you even the speed? What's holding up the process right now? And they generally don't know.
Right, exactly. And I think some of that gap in that knowledge is because you don't know what's in your contracts, right?
Yeah.
You can't construct a business model or a framework or a deals operations function without knowing what's in your current contracts or knowing what's about your current customer base too. So I think that's why I'm saying that the value of what you have in your contracts is so much more, I would say, foundational than to kind of building a good CLM system in itself. We'll get those contracts signed. Can we do it faster? Absolutely. Can we use AI? 100%. But having that knowledge is so powerful to an organization.
Yeah. Jeff Piper, who leads our professional services organization, loves to talk and has been in the field for many years, a pioneer in the space, loves to talk about how you need to analyze the contracts first so you can figure out what's working and then bake good into your workflows. And if you don't know that, then you're just replicating bad workflows and, making them a little more locked down and streamlined. That's not going to get you where you need to go.
That's right.
So I'm going to use a phrase here we use a lot at Workday, looking forward. What are some of the features and capabilities that we have in the platform that haven't been leveraged fully yet in the way that Workday's been using the tech that we're starting to do more of as part of the Customer Zero program? What are some of the things you want to start doing more with?
Yeah, so you mentioned we're using the custom AI for 54 data fields. And to me, this is just scratching the surface of what we can extract from our customer contracts that matter to our business. I think taking that data, we're going to send it to Salesforce, but using an agent to take action on this and automate and drive further efficiencies, for me, is what I'm most excited about.
Great. Yeah, customizing it to the hilt and then building the steps, the actions into what you're doing is something we hear a lot about.
Yeah, and if you expand on that too, right? If we extract that information or more of that information, we can also integrate that with other systems. We are an ERP platform. We have accounts receivable, accounts payable. What kind of numbers can we automatically extract and affect those on the Workday platform itself? So I think, like Kristi said, we're just scratching the surface of what we can do with the Evisort solution.
Yeah, those are some of the things you just described that I'm particularly excited about as being part of Workday now. Because again, I've been in the legal tech field now for a lot of years, and so much of legal technology is confined to legal. Mm-hmm. It's a very siloed technology. What we're deriving from contracts touches every part of the business. We want that data to flow anywhere that it can go and be leveraged. Here we've got the whole ecosystem of Workday products that we can be plugging that data into, making it part of the process.
That's right. And I think one of the pieces of recommendations that I would say, if it's a legal department implementing an Evisort implementation, is that think beyond the legal department. Because like we said in this podcast, that we kept it was a legal tool for so long, and then other organizations got wind of what we could do and what we could extract. I think in more of a modern legal world and an enterprise world, you have to think bigger. These contracts that we have represent your company and your business. And so the best thing that I would recommend, that I wish I would have done a lot earlier, is found other stakeholders throughout the organization earlier than we actually did. And I think when we started Evisort, this is before the big AI boom that currently happened too as well. And so we only looked at it as a legal capability or a utility in and of itself. But then after a while, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So now we're actually educating a lot more people the best that we can. And it would probably have gone a little bit better planned if we had a more of an enterprise level plan a few years ago.
Well, legal teams are by definition cautious, right? They're trained to be that. Well, Greg, Kristi, it's great working with you. Thanks so much for being here today on Meeting of the Minds.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Meeting of the Minds, the Legal AI podcast, is brought to you by Workday CLM, powered by Evisort AI. To learn more about Workday CLM and how we can help you contract better, visit workday.com/contract-management. You can find Meeting of the Minds on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to click subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. On behalf of everyone here at Workday, thanks for tuning in.